Emotional intelligence, it seems like such an elusive dream when you're stuck in those phases of toddler tantrums. But today, we are going to be diving into practical tips and advice on how to build emotional intelligence in your toddler. Hey, I'm Holly. As a pediatric occupational therapist, I help toddler mamas like myself simplify child development in the early years so we can enjoy more free and colorful play and truly discover the wonder of these little years. Today, I am joined by Maria from Parent on Board to talk about emotional intelligence in the early years. We're going to be covering all the questions of what is emotional intelligence? How do we know if we're on track? What can we do to best support emotional development in our young children? Stick around, and if you want to learn more about toddler development as a whole, don't forget to grab my free toddler developmental milestone charts, which are linked below. Today, I'm joined by the lovely Maria Yakimchuk. Maria, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Holly.
Maria is a mom of two rowdy boys, one of which is a highly sensitive child. She holds a master's degree in psychology and has spent an extensive amount of time working with kids with learning and developmental disorders. Maria is also a blogger over at Parent on Board. Thank you so much for being with us, Maria.
Well, thank you for having me, Holly. I'm really excited to be able to talk to other moms and share all the fun stuff that I have learned along the way.
Yeah, we were just actually talking before we clicked over to record about this difference between practicing working with children and actually having your own children. Do you want to tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually part of the reason why I started Parent on Board was because I felt like there's a lot of knowledge just floating around and we have access to a lot of this knowledge, but I felt like a lot of the experts, when they write about things, it's almost as if they've never had children and they're not parents themselves. And so while in the perfect ideal world where you're the ideal parent and you have the ideal child, all of these interventions should work. But when you're in the real world with your real children, they don't work. So
Mm.
that was part of the reason why I wanted to do the Parent on Board, is to help other moms actually understand that, like, certain advice will work, certain things won't work, and how you can tweak it. And I felt very grateful that I have the background that I have in child development and having worked with neurotypical kids and neurodiverse kids, just kind of knowing how it also applies differently to different kids.
I love that so much, because I think sometimes when we do take that like cookie cutter advice and we try to apply it to our own lives and it doesn't work, it can easily kind of put us in the corner. Like either we're not doing something right, or there's something within us that as parents that's not right, or there's something within our children that's not right. But if we recognize that each of us is individual and we do live in this like diverse community and we have to respect those individual needs and just go along for that journey of developing together, it really has a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I actually got to experience it firsthand with both of my children, because my eldest is the highly sensitive child who has ADHD. So it's, a very different set of circumstances I have to deal with than my second son, who is about as neurotypical as they come.
Mm.
I have to do with my eldest, I don't have to do with my youngest. And the stuff that works with my youngest just won't work with my eldest. And it actually, I look at it as a blessing having to experience both of them, because I really see firsthand how a lot of the advice just fall flat because your child just isn't that cookie cutter child.
Gosh, I can just so relate to that. And I do think that it is the blessing of having both of them, both of those kind of differences, because then it does kind of give you a bit more foresight that maybe this isn't just about the nature environment or how you're nurturing your child, but it is about also just who they are, the way that they've been born, the skills that they have, and who they are as a person.
Oh yeah, I think that makes such a big difference because yeah, with my eldest, I did start learning more about highly sensitive children and temperament and how much that plays into it. And just because I used to sort of blame myself for a lot of things, for a lot of his behaviors, it felt like I was the mom who wasn't doing it right. And, I'm a therapist. I should know better. I know all these things. And he's still behaving like that. To then just realize that, well, it's not me. He has a different temperament. He needs a different approach. The same things won't work for him. And once I actually had that understanding, I got so much more compassion for myself as a mom and for him. And it has definitely transformed our relationship.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom on that with us here today. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence overall, but I wonder if you could just clarify for the audience first of all, what a highly sensitive child means.
So a highly sensitive child is a child that's very, normal. We would consider them fairly neurotypical. It's not a diagnosis or a disorder, but it's roughly 20% of the population that the best way to describe them as more. They're more sensitive, they're more intense, they're more stubborn, they just feel so much more. And I can relate to that because I'm a highly sensitive person. So as an adult, like I can tell you, I react to things very differently than, let's say, my husband does or somebody else I know. So it's all within the norm. It's just, they're just a little bit more, and so they're a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I heard this explanation recently about a highly sensitive child being like an orchid, that if you put the correct watering strategy and you have the right amount of light, they'll flourish. But they do need those accommodations, because say a child that's not highly sensitive, they can kind of flourish. They're a bit more hardy. They can kind of swim in any situation that they put into. But as parents, if we can just help to support our child in creating that like more suitable environment, they can flourish. But it does take a bit more.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's basically like, my two favorite authors on the subject were Elaine Aron, who actually coined the sensitive person, highly sensitive child term, and then Mary Shidi Krusinka, she calls them spirited children. So she kind of hers encompasses kids who are a little bit more intense and more wild, which still fall into that highly sensitive child category. And they both of their explanations were that these kids are just more, and they're capable of more. But yes, they're like orchids. They need the right environment. If you put them in the wrong environment, they're much more likely to fail. And if you put them in the right environment, they're so much more likely to succeed and just have that much more to give to the world.
Yeah, it's great. And I think that this really like triggers us off on this topic of emotional intelligence, because so often we hear that emotional intelligence is really important, but then we see behavior, and it can feel like these two things are like super contradictory, especially in the early years. So do you think you could just let us tell the audience what emotional intelligence really is, like a kind of definition for that?
Yeah, sure. The simple definition for emotional intelligence is just your ability to identify and manage emotions of your own as well as emotions of others. So yes, so emotional intelligence would encompass emotional regulation and empathy. But obviously when we talk about toddlers, we have to really adjust the definition because we really can't expect very much of either from them. But that doesn't mean that they're not learning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like really what I wanted to ask you is, in these toddler years, like say 1 to 4, how can we know? Because the feedback that we receive is often such big emotions over seemingly such small and insignificant things. So how can we know that we, like, all the practices that we are putting in place are actually working? Like, this is the right track for our kid. They just need, a bit more brain development.
Yeah, that's always my thing also as a parent, is like separating the emotion from the behavior, just kind of knowing what's normal, what's not. So with both of our sons, what we've done is we did a lot of emotion coaching from the very beginning. So like teaching them names of emotions, basically narrating for them. Like, let's say my son fell and he's crying. I would narrate for him and say, yes, you fell, it's hurting, you're crying, but it's going to be okay. I'm right here. or if he's really angry and he's throwing stuff at me, I try to narrate for him, you're feeling angry right now because such and such happened, right? So the more coaching we give them, the more language we give them, then those surprises at some point of basically telling us that that's how they feel. My youngest just turned 2 this week.
Oh, happy birthday.
A couple of weeks ago that he was angry at something his brother did, and he's walking and he says, I'm angry. And just those little tidbits is exactly how you know that it's working. That my eldest, it took a little longer with him, but he would come to me sometimes and say, like, I'm upset, or he'd be able to read my emotions if I was being overly excited and like yelling about something, but it wasn't necessarily anger. But to him, yelling was kind of anger. He asked me, he's like, Mama, are you angry? So you're noticing both there's empathy, and also he's reading my emotions and he's putting them together. The fact that your toddler will be asking you, like, well, why is this happening? About emotions, or they'll like ask about certain characters. A lot of the times, like, especially with highly sensitive children, if you see them being really attracted to characters that are expressing a lot of emotion, like they're crying or they're really upset, like you can find a highly sensitive child being really zeroed in on that, and they'll really care about that. And that's kind of how you know that it's sticking. It's just these little tidbits of like, they'll name their emotion instead of hitting you. It's working. Mm-hmm. Like, it happens once this week, but maybe next week it'll happen twice. And that's kind of how you know it's the behavior decreases. It doesn't go away completely, right? Because for that you need the brain to develop, and that'll take another 25 years. So it's a long road. So it's just the little tiny bits that you see that when they're telling you, like, I feel this way or I feel that way, or they'll show interest in your emotion, or they show an interest in another person's emotions, is how you know that their emotional intelligence is growing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, like, understanding of it growing, because I think it's very easy for us to look at this word emotional intelligence and say, well, my child can't share yet, they still have tantrums, they still hurt, the emotions are very present in our lives, so surely I'm doing the wrong thing, like we're not on a track for emotional intelligence. But it's not necessarily the absence of emotions, it's the ability to regulate those emotions.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, since we're talking about highly sensitive children, is that with them, it might look a little bit different. The progress there is much slower. And so you might think that you're not making progress, but you are. The problem with highly intelligent children and people is that they're overly tuned into the environment, and they suck up the emotions around them. And then the younger they are, the less they're able to filter that out and even understand which emotions are theirs. Mm-hmm. So they're so overwhelmed with emotion that's where you get the behavior. You get the meltdown, and it's explosive. And then you're just like, what did I do wrong? This is working. But the reality is, it is working. They're just little, and they can't filter out all the emotions. And so like when you see them tuning in and you see them gravitating towards like empathetic responses, even if it's only once in a while, it's working. It is going to take much longer with the highly sensitive kids, because they'll be much more stubborn, much more intense in their responses. And it will feel like it's taking forever, but it will eventually get there.
Yeah, this is really great. I think that is something also that happens in the toddler years, is that we don't, as parents, understand why there are so many emotions, and why the expression is like often over zipping up a jacket or something like just so insignificant. But it is what you said, that they still don't know how to filter out things. So it's not when you see an expression of an emotion, it's not necessarily about the zipper or anything. It's just an overflow of all the things that have been building up.
Yeah.
This is such a great topic, and I feel like I could ask you so many questions about how you did coaching and all of these things, but we wanted to kind of direct this discussion towards play. I know you talk a lot about this on your blog, but how does play help us develop emotional intelligence in these early years?
Well, so I mean, as we know, play is great for kids. That's their medium of learning, that's their medium of living, that's their medium of expression. So obviously, play is the best way to teach anything. It's fun, it's accessible, it's low pressure. And that's kind of the important part, I think, because with toddlers, we're a lot of the times we're in reaction mode. So we try to teach these skills when they're melting down, and that's going to backfire because they can't hear you when they're melting down. There's just nothing going in. So that's why play is so good, because you can role play these things. You can, take two stuffed animals and, let's say one hits the other, and you could say, oh, well, this bear is really sad because he got hit, and this bear is angry because they didn't share. And so you can talk about it, but it's playful, it's very low pressure, and the kids will get engaged in it. The other part about play that's I think is great is it's non-judgmental, because a lot of the times the one mistake that a lot of parents make is that when their child has a negative behavior, let's say they hit their sibling, we immediately go into this, well, why did you do it? And it's very judgmental, it's very confrontational, and the child will evade you. They might try to push back on you, but you won't be getting any empathy out of them. And then the parent is kind of like, well, my child lacks empathy and they're lying. It's like, it's not really that. It's just that they're scared. They're feeling judged. They're feeling pushed on. They're feeling threatened. So you're not going to get anything out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Play allows you to actually even play out that same situation, but with bears. So then it's not about you and your sister. It's about the bears. And, but it's still in the child's mind. They get to practice this situation. And so then the hope is that next time they might be able to be the bear that won't hit. They'll be that's going to say, I'm frustrated. So that's why play is really good. And it can involve, different ages. You can do it with bears. There's games available about emotions. There's little calendars with emotions. So it's like, it provokes their curiosity. And we all know that kids don't learn if they're not interested. And games provide that interest. And another thing that I like is role playing with kids. It's fun, right? Even we as kids, we all love to dress up and take on different roles. And I think it's great. It develops empathy because they can literally step into somebody else's shoes and be somebody else for that moment. And so it's just a great way for them to learn about emotional regulation in a very low pressure environment and to be able to have empathy. And it's a great way. And I mean, with toddlers, without playing, you're not.
Yeah, I love this. I think also for us as the adults, because when we start doing, say, like a role play or like a story with bears, when we're involved in that, we actually have to then think through what are the things that we wanted our toddler to really do, because often it comes to a point where we have like expectations that aren't really developmentally realistic or appropriate, and we don't really realize it in the heat of the moment, because in the heat of the moment we just want like the crying to stop and for everything to be calm again. But when we step back, we can actually become better coaches, because we start thinking about like, yes, sharing is quite problematic because you did have that toy and she did take it from you without asking. So what are the actual tools we want our child to learn in this situation? Like, and even like creating those scripts and, saying like, this is what the bear could say. And they really can pick this up because it's through play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done a lot of that in our house, and it definitely helps. It really helps in those situations that are charged and everybody's melting down, because, then no one's listening. But when we sit down, we play with bears, and we talk later about like, so how do you think your brother felt about this? And how did you feel it? Then it allows for the conversation to flow, and then you can play with them, and it's just like it just helps them. And then their body just kind of remembers it. So it's way to teach them.
Oh, I love this. This is such a doable tool for parents. Because you are sitting down and playing with them anyway, and it's not something that you have to get right, like in the heat of the moment to fix something. It's something that you can be proactive about.
Absolutely. And I mean, we should always be proactive with managing behavior, and obviously it won't happen, life, we're human, it doesn't happen, but as much as we can, and play is a great way for them to learn emotional intelligence and learn how to regulate their own emotions, and what to expect from other people. So it's a long process. It won't happen overnight. We can't expect our toddlers to be super emotional regulators. They just can't. But as long as we set them on the right path, they'll get there.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much for being with us today, Maria. I think that everybody that's listening is going to really take away a lot deeper understanding of this like emotional path that their children are traveling along.
Thank you for having me, Holly. I'm very glad to share this with everybody, and I really hope it does help parents to truly understand their toddlers and maybe make it just a little bit easier, because all of us with toddlers, we need our lives to be just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit, especially in a year with Corona.
Yes, for sure.
Maria, do you want to tell the audience? We'll have all of Maria's links below, but do you want to tell the audience where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me online at www.parentonboard.com. I'm also on Facebook. It's Parent Onboarding. And then you can find me on Instagram, Parent On Board. And same for Pinterest. You can follow me at Parent On Board. I'll be very happy to have new followers. And I love sharing with new people everything that I know and connecting with new moms.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Maria. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.